So this is my take on the 2012 Republican presidential candidates. I'll begin first of all with people who are either in the exploratory phase or are definitely running. Tim Pawlenty, the former governor of Minnesota. Governor Pawlenty is a fiscal conservative. He is somebody who has a record of reducing spending, lowering taxes, and enforcing immigration laws. He's somebody who's committed to fiscal conservatism. He's somebody who's committed to social conservatism, and he's somebody who believes in a strong peace through strength foreign policy. Governor Pawlenty is a nice guy. He seems honest. He seems genuine, but I'm not sure if he's aggressive enough he's certainly aggressive enough. His governing style is aggressive, but his campaign tone might not be aggressive enough for a national stage. We'll see what happens. And his flip flop on cap and trade is something that I would tend to hold against him, except he apologized for. The interesting thing about Tim Pawlenty, though, the thing I find fascinating, is that this is a guy who gets things done, yet he still maintains this kind of nice guy personality. He's kind of, it's sort of his governing style. Like I said earlier, his governing style is different from his campaign mode. And I think that might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing. We'll see how it plays out. Another interesting person that I find fascinating is Herman Cain, the former CEO of Godfather's Pizza. Herman Cain seems to be passionate. He's articulate. For a guy who's a dark horse candidate, or considered a dark horse candidate, it's impressive that 15,000 people gathered to hear him announce his candidacy for president. And he spoke in front of these 15,000 people in a passionate way. He articulated what he believed in without having a speech or teleprompter in front of him. He's not as scripted as most politicians. And he seems to be somebody who is interested in ideas for the future of the country based on common sense. Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives. Obviously, Speaker Gingrich has had a rough start in the campaign. I think that there's no doubt about it that Speaker Gingrich has a history of gaffes, but he also has a history of getting things done in a way that a lot of other folks can't point to, in that he got things done on the federal level, where a lot of the other candidates did not get things done on the federal level, but on a state or city level. Newt Gingrich led the efforts to balance the budget and reform welfare in the 90s. Since leaving the House of Representatives, he's been in the forefront of the ideas campaign. Again, this is another candidate we have with big ideas, somebody who is a true intellect. Whether he could articulate those ideas properly, time will tell, and certainly some of his personal baggage might hurt him. It won't really affect him in my book because I separate public performance from private life, but it might. Some social conservatives might have an issue with him, but I would urge them to look beyond that as well. You then have Mitt Romney, the former governor of Massachusetts. Governor Romney does have several assets on his side. He has strong economic credentials. He turned around his state's finances. At the same time, there's no doubt about it that his health care bill in Massachusetts will play as a liability to his campaign. And it's also true that he has not staked out genuine positions and consistent positions on a host of social issues and campaign finance reform. He seems to be, while Governor Romney understands and is very smart, he understands issues and is very smart, he also is I think that sometimes people are going to look at him and say, this is a politician, this is a slick politician, and that might play out in negative fashion despite how intelligent Governor Romney really is. You then have the former senator from Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum. I got to be frank, Senator Santorum is not my favorite candidate. When George W. Bush was the president, I believe that President Bush's biggest mistake as president was probably in keeping Donald Rumsfeld as Secretary of Defense as long as he did. And while others, like John McCain and others, criticized Bush for doing so, Rick Santorum defended Rumsfeld. So ultimately, Bush did get rid of Rumsfeld, and Bush helped, and obviously, as we now know, Bush's biggest mistake as president in foreign affairs was keeping Donald Rumsfeld as Secretary of Defense. Rick Santorum supported Donald Rumsfeld consistently, and I think that shows a lack of judgment. You then have Congressman Ron Paul of Texas, who obviously This is somebody who is fiscally very right wing, but on foreign affairs, he sides with the left wing of the Democratic Party, and on social issues, I think he's a centrist at best, leaning towards the left, certainly. And, people might be surprised to hear that there are a couple things that I agree with Ron Paul on. But I think that his foreign policy is out of touch. I think his foreign policy is the foreign policy that the left wing has advocated. I think he's part of the Blame America First crowd. I don't think that I don't think he understands foreign policy, frankly. I think that he is out of touch on that issue and doesn't listen to facts, logic, or truth. I think that he listens and spreads left-wing propaganda when it comes to foreign policy. Therefore, he is not a viable candidate. Frankly, the guy's a little crazy. The same goes for former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. Certainly an impressive resume as a governor, and I give him credit for some of the positions that he takes that I agree with. But on foreign affairs, I cannot support somebody who stands up against the interests of both the United States, our allies, and the men and women who serve in uniform. And that's why neither of those two are the last two people who will receive my vote in this primary or the general election because of their, frankly, wackiness and their ignorance on foreign policy. Then you have the candidates who are considering making a run for the White House. You first have the former governor of Alaska, the former vice presidential candidate, Sarah Palin. Governor Palin has considerable star power with Tea Party voters and social conservatives, but once you go to the fiscal conservatives outside the Tea Party, foreign policy hawks, you're then going to find that her appeal is limited. And I'm one of those people who has criticized her in the past for her, frankly, not being all that fiscally conservative, and frankly, for not having really staked out tough positions on foreign affairs. I don't think that she's ready to be president, not because of certainly I think it was a mistake for her to resign as governor, despite what you think, what your reasons are. It was a mistake. And it's not necessarily that I only think that she's inexperienced in foreign affairs issues, because I think that one area where I agree with Obama is judgment matters just as much as experience. And Obama has had neither when he ran, and I'm afraid that Palin has neither as she decides whether or not to run. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, she's somebody who I think she's probably the most gaffe-prone candidate out there. Nobody has made more missteps on the campaign trail and has said some of the ludicrous things that she said are out there. But on the other hand, I think that she brings to the race energy from the Tea Party wing of the party. I have mixed opinions about Congresswoman Bachmann. Look, she seems like a decent enough person. She seems to be consistently conservative. But I think that some of her missteps have angered me at times. So the bottom line is with her, I have mixed opinions. Another candidate who I think probably would be one of the last candidates to enter the race, I don't think this individual is probably going to announce maybe till this late summer sometime, if maybe I'm wrong, is the former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani is definitely a moderate Republican. There's no doubt about it. And I'll get to that in a minute. But Giuliani has a tremendous record in New York. I think he has the most impressive resume as far as accomplishments are concerned of any of the candidates out there. He reduced taxes 17%. He reduced welfare rolls in half. He reduced crime 60%. He turned around the city. The quality of life in the city is better after he left office, and that still continues today. And let's not forget that on September the 11th, 2001, the worst day in our nation's history, he stood firm and helped Americans get through that horror. So I think he has probably the most impressive resume of any of the candidates running. Of course, he's probably the most conservative on foreign affairs and fiscal issues, but he's probably the most moderate on social issues. And finally, you have the former governor of Utah, Jon Huntsman, who, look, I can't support Jon Huntsman. Let me be frank. He support a cap and trade. But I think that the one thing where he loses me completely is his support for the $787 billion quote-unquote stimulus bill. I think that when you compare him to Obama, you're not going to find much of a difference on government spending, and I think that is going to have to that has to affect where he stands. So this is my take on the candidates, and obviously I might have stated this before. I narrowed it down to between Kaine, Pawlenty, and Giuliani, but I am entitled to change my mind.